Hey there, welcome to Mike's Collection, episode 185. I'm Mike, and the part of my collection that I'm going to be talking about today is some of my new Marvel Legends. And when I say new Marvel Legends, some of them are very new, and some of them not so much. I still do a lot of videos where I just kind of cover everything that I bought in the last couple of weeks, just these weird miscellaneous videos. But fewer people tend to tune in for those. More people seem to be interested in a more focused video because, I don't know, there's probably not a whole lot of you out there that collect all the exact same things that I collect. So you might not be interested in a video with one Transformer, one Ninja Turtle, one G.I. Joe, whatever. So I find myself more and more now, kind of compiling things and thinking like, okay, well, I've got 2 new Marvel Legends. I'll set those aside. And when I get a couple of more, I'll do a whole video. Anyway, with my Marvel Legends, I don't think I've done a review since Christmas, and it is now mid-May. So, yeah, I've got Marvel Legends that I've had here literally since the start of the year. So some of it might be kind of old news to some of you, but, whatever. To keep you interested, I will start with my newest one. This guy I literally just got 2 days ago. And this guy wasn't really on my radar. Usually with Marvel Legends, I'm kind of well aware of what's coming out, and I usually have them pre-ordered online from Big Bad Toy Store or my local GameStop. Now, if you watched my last video, I told you how my local GameStop just closed down, which sucked, because there used to be GameStops, or in Canada, it used to be called EB Games up until just about a year ago when they all became GameStops. And I thought that was maybe a good sign. Like, okay, they're being kind of amalgamated into this like bigger company, GameStop. It's a bigger entity. But it doesn't seem to be going great because my local store was the third one within like driving distance for me to have closed down in like the last 2 years or so. Anyway, so that kind of sucks. But I'm pretty close with the manager at the Bears Lake location, which is probably now the closest location to me. It's about 20 minutes away. But he used to manage my location in Sackville. Anyway, I got a call from him on Tuesday, and he said he had a Marvel Legends Ulik figure in, and he was putting it aside for me because he assumed I wanted it. And so I went in like the next day and picked up Ulik here. And so you can see by the size of the box, this is one of the bigger deluxe figures. Most Marvel Legends cost $30, $35 here in Canada. That's the price of the standard figures, where this guy here was like $52 or so. So, is he worth it? I don't know, maybe. Like, he's a pretty big figure. He probably does have twice as much plastic as the average figure to construct him. He does have the extra head there, you can see, which is cool. He also has his weapon, which is like a big mallet. And it looks like he also has, you can barely see them, but it looks like he has some alternate hands. So these are open hands, and these are probably closed fists, if I had to guess. So this is a cool looking figure. I'm not a big Ulik fan. I don't know how many major Ulik fans are out there, but, he's a character that's been around forever. He's like mostly a Thor villain. He's like a troll, who fights Thor. I've got him in a handful of comic books. Probably mostly Thor comic books. I can't think of anything immediately of where he might have fought somebody else, but it wouldn't surprise me if he is, crossed paths with Spider-Man and stuff at some point in time. He kind of falls into the category with me of a couple other villains who I like. They've been around forever, but I don't know a whole lot about. Like Blastar, who is like another big hefty guy with a beard. He's like from the Negative Zone. And then there's like Terrax, who's another big guy with a beard and an axe, and he's like more of a cosmic villain who fights the Silver Surfer, former Herald of Galactus. I like all these guys. Sometimes you need these big bruiser villains, just for a good comic book slugfest. So this guy's pretty cool. You see his package, all the artwork, very little bio in multiple languages there. So pretty cool looking box. So, since he's the newest figure I got, I'll pop him open, and we'll take a look at him first, and then we will take a look at all the other figures I've got in the past 5 months or so. Anyway, before we do that, I just want to quickly mention, you might notice this is a new location for me. I'm shooting this video from my upstairs office. So ever since COVID, I had to start working from home. And fortunately, we have, so me and my wife, we both work for the federal government. And when we started working from home, we were fortunate in that we've got a nice house with 2 spare bedrooms right next to each other. So this spare bedroom, which we weren't using for much of anything except when guests came over, has now become my cubicle. And then the spare bedroom over here is her office. Now, normally I don't ever shoot these videos upstairs because me and my wife Vanessa were usually home. And even though, you know, she's great and she supports my hobby, she's actually in the office today, which is rare, but because she's a big deal there, she's an assistant director. And the assistant directors occasionally do have to go into the office to monitor things. So she has to go in there like twice a month. And so she was in there today. And our office is in Bears Lake, where that remaining GameStop location is. And she actually, on her lunch break, she went out and grabbed a burger, but she swung by GameStop and called me just to say, is there anything you want me to look for in here? So yeah, she's fantastic. She's very supportive. However, I feel a little embarrassed talking about this stuff on camera when she's in earshot. If I was here doing this video and she could hear everything I was saying, I'd be a little embarrassed. So that's why I always go downstairs to my man cave, which is where every other video I've ever shot has taken place, and I do this stuff in there. But because I'm home alone today, well, not completely alone. When I'm here in my office, usually my dog Casey, who sometimes makes cameos in my videos, is hanging out with me, and there you see Casey. Casey, say hello. Anyway, so there's Casey with me. She usually chills out with me while I work. So yeah, we're hanging out with her today. So we'll take a look at Ulik, and then probably for the rest of the figures, I will go down to my man cave that you're more familiar with, and we'll review those guys down there. So yeah, let's pop this guy open, take a closer look at him. So here is Ulik outside of the packaging. And he looks pretty cool. He is big. He's almost too big to fit on my screen here with my limited desk space. But you can see lots of detail in that face there. Nice big ugly mug on him. Then he's got this loose necklace, which I guess you could choose to remove if you want. It does float around a little awkwardly, but kind of cool. That's a separate piece, I guess. Then he's got this kind of armored torso, big hairy arms. At first glance, I'm kind of wondering, can they reuse some of these parts? You know, there's probably some, because, you know, they're always thinking about reusing these. So I look at these arms, and those could be like an Abomination or some other character like that. But that's probably why they have these, like, the sculpted, like the hairy shoulders. You notice that's attached to his harness rather than his arm, because his arm would probably be more likely to be used on a more, like, reptilian character or something. They don't want to have that hair attached to it. So yeah, you got that. Yeah, he's got all the standard articulation. I'm not really going to go over that. I feel nobody really cares about the articulation, but ab crunch, spins, you know, blah blah blah. So knees, single jointed knees. Let me see, good range of movement there, and the foot goes back pretty far too. It's got a good, nice big joint on the ankles, and yeah. He's cool. I like it. On the back there, not much to see. He's got that kind of chainmail armor, and it's all sculpted, so you can run your finger across that and you feel it. So that's cool. Yep, I dig it. So as I mentioned, he does have 2 extra hands. So he's got the closed fists with his like pretty brutal looking brass knuckles. So you could really have him throw down with Thor if you wanted to. And then he's also got his mallet. So this hand here looks like way too open to hold that. So he's really only got one hand that you can display the mallet in. So there you go. And then he's got the alternate head. And I'm thinking I might display him with this head. I don't usually like faces that are this expressive, like with open mouths and stuff. Sometimes it's nice to have them as an option, but when you only get one head on your figure, like say the Marvel Legends Beast, they released Beast with this like yelling face, which is great for scenes where he's fighting, but Beast is kind of like the X-Men scientist, and he spends a lot of his time in a lab coat, looking rather intelligent. So it's kind of too bad that the only face they gave you was his like yelling face. But with this guy here, like I like both heads, but I do think the yelling head is maybe a little more interesting. So yeah, I think I might display him on my shelf like this. And I know I started saying earlier in my introduction that this guy was not on my radar. Like, I knew he was coming out, but I thought he was maybe a store exclusive. And I was thinking maybe Walmart, maybe Target. I'm not sure if that's the case, but where he's not like a favorite character of mine, he's not the type of exclusive that if he didn't show up anywhere in my area, I wouldn't really lose any sleep over it. Like, he's cool. I'm glad I got him. But yeah, if he was a Target exclusive, and we don't have any Targets in Canada, I might not have been able to track him down. If he was a Walmart exclusive, we have plenty of Walmarts, but in the past, Walmart exclusives have been kind of hard to find too. They're not the best at stocking their exclusives. So I don't know. Maybe this guy's not exclusive at all. Maybe he is an exclusive to either to maybe Walgreens or something, because Walgreens exclusives tend to show up at GameStops here in Canada. I don't know. But anyway, if you find him wherever he happens to be, I would recommend picking him up. He's pretty cool. Now, before we move on to the next guy, maybe I'll actually bring the next figure out here for a second just so you can do a size comparison. So next up, we're going to take a look at Sleepwalker. So this is a standard 6-inch Marvel Legend, and so you can see just how big Ulik is by comparison. He really kind of towers over this guy. But anyway, now let's focus on Sleepwalker. Now, unless you're a really hardcore, old-school Marvel guy like me, you might not know who Sleepwalker is, because this is a character who does not get a whole lot of love and attention. He was first introduced in the 90s, and I was really excited about this character, because when I started collecting comic books in the 80s, it was a lot of, I guess what we'll call like legacy books were going. I didn't feel like I was getting in on the ground floor of anything, really. Like, there were some books that were pretty new, and were only, maybe 10 or 15 issues in. Like, for example, The New Mutants, which was a spin-off of the X-Men. That was in around the issue teens or 20s when I started collecting comic books. But even that seemed like a lot. Like, to have to go back and try and find 20 back issues. I was joining a story already in progress. And things like Spider-Man, X-Men, Captain America, those things were in like the issue like 200s. So, I didn't mind jumping in. It was almost nice to like have this established world that I was joining up with. But it was cool in the 90s when there was this like resurgence of new books and brand new characters that I really felt like I was getting on the ground floor. And I felt like I had taken some ownership of these characters. So, for example, there was characters like Ghost Rider, who was like a character that was being revived from the 70s, except rather than just take the original Ghost Rider, Johnny Blaze, and bringing him back, they gave the Ghost Rider powers to a whole new character named Danny Ketch. And so he was more like a legacy character, the kind of thing you see over at DC when, a new character steps in and takes over the mantle of an established character. So that's what we got with him. Same as Deathlock. He was another character that was kind of popular in the 70s. He hadn't been around for a while. And they brought him back, but it was a brand new character. So a new guy became Deathlock, and I got in on the ground floor with him. Then the New Warriors. They were a whole team of teenage superheroes. Most of them had been previously established in other books, like Nova. Some of them hadn't been around for many, many years. But that was another one. It was all these characters were brought together. They were all supposed to be young, and I felt like I related to that book. But probably my two favorites were Sleepwalker and Darkhawk. These were brand new characters, not based on any previously established, comic books or lore or legacy characters. And they were both, young teen guys that, through circumstances ended up with superpowers. So Darkhawk specifically, he found an amulet, and that turned him into Darkhawk. That's a little bit more of a classic type of story. But Sleepwalker here his was a little weirder. So the kid doesn't really turn into Sleepwalker, but when he goes to sleep, Sleepwalker manifests himself from his mind, and he kind of roams the city and, chases bad guys, but he can only do that when his human host is asleep. So they are separate characters, which was, kind of a unique thing. And yeah, it was a cool book, and I liked Sleepwalker. I really dig the look of him. He looks like kind of your standard alien, like that you'd expect to come off of a UFO with the big eyes. I think sometimes he was drawn with much bigger eyes than this. This is I don't know exactly what this figure is based on. I think it's based on his maybe a little bit more of a modern look. His costume hasn't changed much over the decades because he hasn't really been featured in that many comic books. His original series was relatively short-lived. I want to say maybe made it about 30 issues or so. And then he popped up here and there. He was guest starred in Captain Marvel's book for a little while, and he might show up when there's like event books, like Siege or Civil War or something. He might get a little cameo here and there, but he really hasn't been used very much. He had a 4-issue miniseries a couple of years ago, which I picked up, and it was nice to revisit him. And I know his costume got a little bit of a reboot in that series. And I'm thinking maybe this costume is based more on the rebooted costume, but I don't know. Anyway, it's a great figure. It's a guy I've been waiting for forever. And this is the first Sleepwalker figure that we've ever gotten. So even some of those other characters, like Darkhawk and stuff, it took a long time to get figures of him. But we first got Darkhawk figures in the Marvel Universe 3 3/4-inch line quite a few years ago now. And then he did get remade into a Marvel Legend, I want to say 4 or 5 years ago. So when that started happening, it felt like Sleepwalker was definitely coming soon, and then he just never did. He's been at the top of my want list for years. Like if you told me to name my top 100 most wanted Marvel Legends, Sleepwalker would have been my number one spot. And so yeah, I'm super stoked to get him. Although I will say, like, now that I finally have him, I don't know, there's something a little underwhelming about it. I don't know. Like, I think it looks like him. Like, his costume is always a little bland. One problem I think I have with him is Sleepwalker originally appeared to be this like taller, lankier creature. He wasn't really like a muscle man. I think they draw him that way in his more modern interpretations. But, not only is his costume bland, like, it's all blue with some tattered purple stuff hanging off him, but he's got no logo, no real defining features, even for his accessories. So he came with just 2 extra hands here. So I've got him with his fists, but you can give him these open hands. There's not much to him, really. And for a character that I've been waiting like 30 years for an action figure of, I feel like I should be more excited and that this guy would be a shoo-in for my best of the year list. But I don't really feel that way for some reason, and I couldn't really tell you why. Like, I think it's a fine figure. I think maybe my anticipation was just a little too high, and it just maybe doesn't quite live up. And so anyway, I really am super stoked to get this figure. Highly recommend him. He was part of the Doctor Strange Multiverse of Madness wave of figures, which just came out to coincide with the new movie, which is kind of weird because he doesn't appear in the movie. Now, mind you, there are a lot of quick shots of Doctor Strange passing through different multiverses and stuff, and who knows, maybe they hide Sleepwalker in there somewhere, but I didn't see him. But they do this a lot where they do a movie line of figures and they stick in a couple of comic based characters as well. So for this particular Doctor Strange line, I wasn't interested in any of the movie figures. I typically don't buy a lot of the MCU figures because I'm a comic book guy. I like the comic books. So from the Doctor Strange line, the only 2 characters I bought were the 2 that were not actually based on the movie, but were based on the comic books. So Sleepwalker here was one of them. And why don't we take a look at the other guy right now? So this is Despair. This is the other comic-based figure that appeared in the Doctor Strange Multiverse of Madness line. And I was stoked to get this guy too. Because like Sleepwalker, he's kind of an obscure, underused Marvel character. Pretty sure this is the first ever Despair action figure ever produced. Now, I don't know as much about this guy as I do Sleepwalker. Like, some of these characters, I just love any kind of weird D-list character from the Marvel Universe. Some of that stems from my childhood when they put out the official handbook of the Marvel Universe, which was basically like an encyclopedia of all the characters. And me and my brother, we'd buy those and we'd flick through them, and we were just like, ooh, this guy's cool. I want to know more about this guy. So it kind of gave us a sense of really feeling like we knew the whole Marvel Universe. But I'd be hard-pressed to tell you how many comic books I've actually read with Despair in it. I just remember him mostly from the handbook. I'm sure I have read books with him in it. I think he is also, tied to Doctor Strange, which would make sense since they put him in the Doctor Strange movie line. But I think he also fights the X-Men. Now, typically my brother always bought X-Men comic books, so I might have read Despair stories in his X-Men. Neither of us really read Doctor Strange comics, so I probably didn't come across Despair there. But, I'm really not sure. There's no specific Despair story that sticks in my head. But he's a great-looking character, and I'm always happy to populate my shelves with, more obscure Marvel characters rather than just more Iron Man armors or Spider-Man in silly outfits. So for accessories, all he came with was a couple of closed fists. So he's got the open hands there, which I think I like those better. I don't think this guy's he's not really a fisticuffs kind of guy. He's more of a spooky guy. I don't even know what his powers are, to be honest with you. But anyway, so yeah, I'm going to display him with his open hands instead of his fists. And yeah, his body is pretty plain too, like Sleepwalker. There's not a whole lot going on here. He's just solid black on a standard body, which I'm sure we've seen many times before. And then he's just got the painted detail to kind of make him unique. Unique head sculpt, which has got this kind of weird, like melting skull kind of vibe to it. Now, if I remember correctly, this isn't just some dude in a costume. This is like some sort of, like, he's more like a demon or a creature, I think. Like, he's something that lives in the dream realm or something along those lines. I could be making that up. But yeah, I don't think he's just some dude in tights anyway. But anyway, he's a great looking figure. I'm happy to get him. I know I said he only came with those hands, but both him and Sleepwalker, they also came with Build-A-Figure parts. They each came with a leg to build Rintra, the cow type guy from the Doctor Strange movie. But I just threw those legs in my spare parts bin because I don't plan on buying any of the Doctor Strange movie figures, so I will never complete my Rintra, unfortunately. But yeah, cool. I like the cape there with the holes in it. The two-tone cape with the black. You see it's got like a nice texture on the inside. The back is pretty flat. I don't know if there's a whole lot more to say about this guy other than I think he's really cool looking. So yeah, again, recommended. Now this is a figure here that I was really stoked to get. This is a brand new Baron Zemo figure, and he was released as part of the, I guess they call him the retro line. So he's not part of like a full wave of figures. He doesn't come with a Build-A-Figure part. He just came carded. And yeah, super stoked to get this guy because I love Baron Zemo. Like, this is another character I was probably first introduced to way back in the day. Whoops. From the official handbooks. And this is the second Baron Zemo. His father was one of Captain America's original villains. And, he was a pretty nasty guy, I think kind of associated with the Nazis, as most of Cap's early villains were. But then when Cap woke up in the modern day, the original Baron Zemo's son had now taken up the mantle. But this guy here seemed to have a little bit more depth to him. He wasn't just evil. He was the guy that became the leader of the Thunderbolts, if you're familiar with that story. So in the, I guess I want to say the 90s, they did a story called, I forget what the original story was called, but anyway, a bunch of Marvel heroes, the Avengers, the Fantastic Four, the Avengers included Captain America and Iron Man. Those guys all went up against Apocalypse, and they all supposedly died. So all of those main heroes were missing from the main Marvel universe. Now, really what happened is they actually just kind of got sucked into a pocket universe, and there was a new comic series called Heroes Reborn that was drawn by some of the Image artists who had returned to Marvel for the first time after leaving to go to Image a couple of years earlier. So Rob Liefeld and Jim Lee came back to Marvel, and it was this big hyped up storyline for them to reboot, Iron Man, Captain America, the Avengers, Fantastic Four, some of these characters who hadn't been, I don't know, who hadn't been selling all that well. So this was an attempt to reboot them. So that was cool. They had their own little pocket universe going, and that went okay for a while, but then they eventually brought them back in a storyline called Heroes Return. Anyway, all that being said, is that during that time, they came up with a pretty clever storyline that all of the, the Earth's biggest heroes had vanished, and, the Earth needed protection. So this new team of superheroes showed up out of nowhere, and they were called the Thunderbolts, and they kind of, presented themselves as basically a new team of Avengers. And they were led by a character named Citizen V. And here is my Citizen V Marvel Legend figure from a few years back. Now, so the big reveal at the end of the first issue of Thunderbolts, after the Thunderbolts showed up and saved the day and everybody was cheering for them, then they went back to their headquarters and they unmasked, and they were actually the Masters of Evil in disguise. So Citizen V was actually Baron Zemo, and they had this whole plot basically to win, everybody's trust, and they were going to use that to, to gain power. So they had an evil plan all along. But the interesting thing about Thunderbolts is as that storyline went along, and a lot of the villains kind of had a change of heart, and they kind of wanted to become good guys. And as unlikely as it seemed, Baron Zemo was one of those guys. He never became a full-on good guy, but he was definitely sort of an anti-hero for a while. And I really liked that they kind of gave him some new layers. His character became a little bit more interesting. And even when he went back to Baron Zemo, he was still, he was a little bit more conflicted. And I've always loved the look of this character. Like, it's kind of silly with the pink mask, the purple costume, yellow gloves, and he's got this like leopard print fur on him. It's all pretty crazy, but it's all pretty awesome. And I really dig it. So, anyway, I really wanted a Baron Zemo figure. And I previously mentioned the Marvel Universe 3 3/4 inch line. And funnily enough, I have a whole bunch of those guys. I was really all in on collecting the 3 3/4 inch line of Marvel Legends. I have a Baron Zemo from that line, which I probably should have brought out here to compare, but I didn't. But one thing I did bring out was my 3 3/4 inch Ulik, which I meant to compare when I had Ulik out here, but I forgot to. Anyway, so there's my little Ulik. But anyway, so I was really into the 3 3/4 inch line. And then the 6-inch line of Marvel Legends kind of came back. And I was not a big fan of Marvel Legends when Hasbro first started putting them out. I found that they were kind of gangly and the proportions were just off. But I think it was around 2014, after they had a bit of a hiatus, that they came back and their figures were actually really nice. And that was the first time that I kind of took notice of them, and I was like, ooh, these are pretty nice figures. But I felt I was already too deep into the 3 3/4 inch line to switch. Anyway, one of the figures from those early waves was a Baron Zemo. And I remember seeing it around, and it was very enticing, but I was like, no, I'm not going to get into collecting 6-inch figures. And I passed on it. But then very shortly afterwards, Marvel or Hasbro stopped producing the 3 3/4 inch line, and they really put all their focus into Marvel Legends, and they kind of won me over. And a couple of waves later, I was pretty much a completist. I was buying all kinds of Marvel Legends, and I was really kicking myself for not getting Baron Zemo. And then he was very expensive on the secondary market. I never saw it around anywhere. I never pulled the trigger and paid those expensive prices on eBay, but I always kind of hoped maybe I would come across some secondhand someday or something like that. He has been on the top of my want list for quite some time of previously released figures. And a year or two ago, they released this Baron Zemo figure. Now, he came with a little purple mask. I don't have it displayed on him. But this was the Zemo from the Falcon and Winter Soldier series. So this is Zemo as he appeared in the live-action MCU. So he also appeared in Captain America Civil War, in which he didn't wear a mask at all in that movie. And that's kind of why I displayed him like that here. Don't mind, Casey's freaking out upstairs there now. I don't know if you can hear her. But anyway, I told you I don't usually buy MCU characters. The only time I do is when I don't have a comic book version of that character in my collection. So I kind of bought this as a placeholder, and I thought, well, at least I can say I have a Baron Zemo now. But anyway, I was very happy to find out that they had announced that they were going to put out another classic Baron Zemo. And at first, I thought they were just re-releasing the one that I had passed on. It wasn't until later that I realized, no, this is actually a new figure. It might share some parts, like maybe the same head sculpt or something. Yeah, Vanessa's just coming home, so Casey's freaking out. But anyway, so it might share some same parts, but otherwise this is a much more classic, much more villainous look for Zemo. The other one that came out back in like 2014 or so had his more contemporary look, a little bit more of a modern, kind of when he was doing the hero thing a little bit more. So really stoked to get this one. It's a character I've wanted for a long time. I think it's a great sculpt. Like it's got some nice details. You can see the expression through his mask. He's got the sword, nice little sword there. I just love all the details on this guy. I think he's great, and I'm really stoked to finally have him in my collection. Now, before I move on to the next figure, I figured I would just go grab my little Marvel Universe Baron Zemo for a quick comparison. So you can see that the outfits here, they match up pretty much spot on. But, the little guy here, he's just lacking in some ways. Like this piece here is a separate floating piece, which never really looks right. You can see they didn't really have these also kind of float around kind of awkwardly when they should sit at the top of his boots. It lacks the leopard print stripes. The articulation on these guys was sometimes a little gangly, sort of the same issue I had. This is the same issue I had with the early Marvel Legends. Like I found with these 3 3/4 inch figures, the bulkier guys like Ulik here tended to be pretty good, but some of the little smaller, wiry guys, they looked a little weird. And also just like the, they tried to do this paint wash over his mask and everything. I think the mask looks okay, but this new one here is definitely, superior. So, I always like this look for Zemo, but it definitely looks bigger, or it looks better in the bigger scale. So next up, we'll take a look at Baron Zemo's arch enemy. This is Captain America. Now, this is one of those guys where they keep making figures. There's lots of Captain Americas out there, lots of Iron Mans out there. I really don't like feeling forced to buy new versions of these guys. They tend to include them in a lot of waves where I want to complete the Build-A-Figure, and then I have to buy an extra Captain America just to complete, the Build-A-Figure part. But this is a Captain America that was not part of any sort of Build-A-Figure wave. I forget what they called this wave exactly, but it's kind of a throwback and anniversary figure to the very first wave of Marvel Legends. So the packaging is a nod to how that original packaging looked. And I was very happy to pick this guy up without any extra motivation or any feeling like I had to pick him up. The reason I bought this guy is because I think it's probably the best Captain America figure ever made at this scale. Anyway, he's pretty great. So this figure is, I think for all intents and purposes, the exact same figure that we got maybe a year ago as part of what I believe they called the 80th anniversary line. And they put out a couple of figures from there. I picked up the Iron Man from that wave for the same reasons. Even though I had a bunch of Iron Mans in my collection before, I think the 80th anniversary Iron Man is probably the best one ever produced. Now, since I'm talking about him, I might as well bring him out here for a second for comparison. So, there have been plenty of Iron Mans, a lot of them based off of the movies and off of some of his more modern armors. But this is my classic Iron Man. This is the Iron Man I love, from the 70s, 80s. The armor was very basic, but this figure was great. It's just like, it's great proportions, great paint job. It had a whole bunch of extra accessories. It had an unmasked head, so you could give him Tony Stark's head. He had different hands, lots of blast effects, repulsor rays. So a very cool figure. In that same line, there was also a Thor and a Captain America. I wanted to get the Captain America, but I never saw it anywhere. I don't think I saw the Thor anywhere either, but I wasn't as intrigued by that one because I actually like Thor's modern appearance more than his classic kind of 80s appearance. But anyway, I wanted that cap, never saw it. So now it's been re-released. They've recolored it. And I do think that this Captain America is superior to the previous release. The other one, I think, had a darker blue, and he had probably some different accessories. I think this guy looks better in the lighter blue. And since I've been pulling out some of my Marvel Universe smaller figures, I grabbed a Captain America out of there too. And I never really liked this figure all that much. He, again, is a little gangly. You can see how his joints look kind of weird. But this is my preferred look for Captain America. This shade of blue, he's got the chainmail, he's got the Buccaneer boots. It's maybe a little silly, but this is kind of classic Captain America to me. This is what I want my Captain America to look like. And as you can see, that's what I'm getting here, except much cooler. Just way better. The larger format definitely brings out the detail. And, this is... They've done Captain America in this style in the Legends before, but never this good. So I do have a couple other Captain Americas in my collection. What I would consider my kind of go-to Captain America for the last several years has been this guy here. This is the closest thing I had to a classic Captain America. And it's pretty good. Like it's a decent figure. I still like it. But this is... I don't know exactly what this is based on. I think this might be more the Ultimate Captain America, which is technically a different guy. It's from a different multiverse, essentially. So, he's got some of those classic elements, but you see he's got some of this extra bit, like this gray padding here, the gloves, the boots aren't Buccaneer boots, he's got the knee pads. The helmet, he doesn't really have wings on his helmet, they're painted on instead of actual wings that come off of his helmet. He's got this, chin strap, so his helmet looks a little bit more, well, it looks more like a helmet than a mask. So yeah, he's just a little more contemporary. And, I thought it was a decent figure, but it doesn't really match up with my other classic Marvel heroes. And another problem is this guy's really short. I have Spider-Man figures that are taller than this guy, and that just never really seemed right with me. You can see this Captain America is quite a bit larger, and this feels more like how big Captain America should be. And then this Captain America, this is another one I have, but this is a MCU, movie-based Captain America. So it's a decent figure. I think it captures the look of him from the movies quite well. But again, it just doesn't really gel with my mostly comic-based collection. So having those two guys in my collection just wasn't really good enough. I've been waiting for a better Captain America. And I would say I officially have the best Captain America now with this new one here. Just as is, he's great. He's got all the articulation you'd want. He's got the double-jointed elbows there, double-jointed knees, so great range of motion on the legs and all that sort of stuff. Just the wash that's on the boots and stuff there brings out the details. He's got this harness, which you could take off of him if you wanted to, because that's not necessarily part of his classic look. But it looks good, and it holds his shield. You can plug his shield in the back of there, which is really cool. Now, you'll also notice on his shield, I've got this kind of blast effect. So that's to me, I don't know if that's recreating this necessarily, if that's what it's supposed to be, but it reminds me of the cover of Captain America Annual where he fights Wolverine and Wolverine slashes Captain America's shield. That's what I see with that effect. But it came with a couple other effects. It also came with this electric, so the soft plastic bendy electric effect. And you'll see it does have a couple little plugs on it here. And so there's some holes in the shield you can plug this in. So if you wanted to make it look like Electro was zapping him or something, you could have him blocking the electrical blast with his shield. Another thing that's really cool is he came with these 3 little bullet hits. So there's 3 of these things, which are probably going to be easy to lose. But you can plug those into the shield too. So if you wanted to create a little diorama where a Hydra soldier or Baron Zemo was shooting at him, he could be blocking it as well. He came with a bunch of extra hands. So this one's pretty cool. That's like a saluting hand. And he's got a pointing hand if he's leading the Avengers into battle. I have him with the 2 fists, but he also has opening hands, which is good if you want to have him throwing his shield or something. And then lastly, he came with a Steve Rogers head. So it's a really nice sculpt on that head. And a really nice little extra detail is if you put this head on him, what Captain America usually does is he just folds his cowl back. So it comes with this piece here. And I guess maybe I'll show you what it looks like. So you pop his head off, like so. Then you can just put the cowl around his neck and then plop his head on. A little bit of effort here. There we go. So then you can have that resting. So if you want to have him unmasked, it looks like he's just pulled his mask back off of his head there. So that's very cool. So yeah, this is a great Captain America figure. They really knocked it out of the park with this one. I can't really imagine them
making a better Cap. I think this is the top of the game right here. Now, speaking of Captain America, the next figure I'm going to show you is Zombie Captain America. And I've had this figure for quite some time. In fact, there might be a chance that I showed you this figure before. I really can't recall, to be honest with you. But yeah, I think I got him right at the start of the year. And yeah, this guy's pretty cool. He's from the What If animated series. And the first episode, or no, it wasn't the first episode. One of the early episodes of What If, they went to a world where the Marvel Universe had been overrun by a zombie plague. And that is based on a comic book series called Marvel Zombies, of which they've done multiple series of. And I've been a fan of them. The first couple were written by Robert Kirkman, the creator of The Walking Dead. So it really makes sense. This guy's really dusty. It's because he's been laying on my floor waiting to be reviewed for months. So yeah, don't mind little dust bunnies on him. But yeah, very cool figure. And he's not super gory. Like, he's got, exposed ribs and some blood spatter there. Some more exposed ribs on the back. His legs are pretty gnawed up. Like, you can see right through them. You see some bone. But I think the fact that they colored his skin blue, it kind of makes him look a little cartoony and not too scary for kids to play with. But yeah, it's a really cool looking figure. It does have an animated look. It captures the look from the cartoon, I think, pretty well. And, he's still got all that good standard articulation, double jointed knees, double jointed elbows, all that stuff. So yeah, very cool. Like him a lot. And so he's from the What If series. I did not buy the whole line. The only other figure I had gotten from the line was Captain Carter, which is from the first episode of What If. That was called What If Peggy Carter took the super soldier serum instead of Steve Rogers. So she got kind of all bulked up, and she got her own shield, and she was the hero of the show. Now, I did show you this figure before. She actually was... she was kind of a surprise hit for me. I almost wasn't even planning on buying this figure, but then I bought it right near the end of the year last year, and it actually made my best of list for 2021. She was a nice surprise. So anyway, the only reason I'm hauling her out here is because there was another What If figure that I'd considered buying, but didn't feel essential to my collection, and it was kind of expensive. But a couple of months had gone by, and I was kind of thinking, I better buy that thing before it becomes impossible to find. It is cool, and so that's the next one I want to talk about. We can I'll move Cap out of here, but I'll keep Peggy around because this next figure relates to her episode. And this is the Hydra Stopper. So I think I'm going to have to adjust my camera a little bit so we can get this guy into frame. So here he is. So if you've seen that episode, it starts off just like the Captain America movie. Steve Rogers is this little wimpy guy, and he almost doesn't make the cut for the military. But then he volunteers for the super soldier serum. They pump him full of chemicals, and he gets all buff and becomes Captain America. So in the What If cartoon, bad guys show up, they interrupt the process, and so Peggy has to take the chemicals. She becomes the super soldier, and Steve Rogers is left as a little wimp. But he doesn't leave Carter hanging because he goes and gets this armor that I think it was developed by Howard Stark, and he's able to join Peggy Carter in the battlefield by basically being a little wimpy guy wearing a tank. And yeah, the reason I didn't feel this was essential because even though it's not necessarily MCU based, it's not really comic book based. I don't think there's any precedent for this character in the Marvel Universe. He looks like other characters. Like, he looks a lot like the Ironmonger. And if this had been an Ironmonger figure in the classic comic book look, which was like a blue armor, I would have been all over that. But this guy here, it just kind of felt like, this thing was like $80. And it's for something that's not from the comic books. I just didn't really feel like I needed it. But as you can see, it is awesome. It's big, it's heavy, it's got lots of detail. I do like this like militaristic look about it. He's got lots of accessories here with this removable kind of like jetpack, and he's got these removable blast effects on there. He did have he did have a couple extra hands. And I'm trying to think, did he have any more accessories? These are the only things I have laying around handy, but I have had this figure for a little while now. I thought he might have come with more, but maybe not. But anyway, he doesn't need much more. Like, he's already, like I said, a big, heavy, hulking figure. I really like the design of him. He moves pretty well. And, yeah, like, look at all this stuff. Just looks great. And it's cool to have him to pair with Captain Carter. So there you go. That is the Hydra Stopper. All right, we're going to keep things moving along because I still have a few more figures to show you, and I don't want this video to go too long. So let's talk about Hercules. So this guy was released as, again, on the, I don't know what they call this line, the classic line or the retro line. So he comes on like an old silver card, which is kind of like how Toy Biz Marvel figures came in the early 90s. So he's kind of a throwback to that. Although I don't believe Hercules actually had a figure in that old retro line. Anyway, this is a cool figure. Like, I've never been a huge Hercules fan. Like Thor, he is based on the actual, like, mythical god, and Marvel just incorporated him into their Marvel universe as, like, a superhero. You know, he's obviously a pretty scantily clad, hairy dude. I love that they didn't shy away from giving him all his big manly chest hair and stuff. But he's never a character that I've really gravitated towards. I've never really collected any Hercules comic books. You know, he's served as an Avenger a few times, and I've never really been reading the Avengers at times when Hercules was a member. So, you know, I've got a decent amount of comic books with Hercules in here, but yeah, he's just not one of my favorites. However, Marvel Legends did release a different version of Hercules a couple of years ago, and I thought about buying it just because I do like adding new characters to my collection, and Hercules is a classic character that I did not have. However, it was in a more contemporary look, where he had pants on, he had a little like man bun, and it wasn't a bad figure, but I did kind of hold out hope that they would release this kind of goofier, nakeder, more naked, classic Hercules. Do I actually think this is a better costume? Not necessarily, but this is just what I know. If I'm going to have one version of a character, I want them in their kind of, what I would consider his most iconic look, the classic look. This is what he wore when I started collecting comic books. So even though, yeah, I would probably prefer a guy in pants and everything, I just, with Hercules, I wanted to go with this classic look. I do have one other Hercules figure in my collection. Again, it's from the 3 3/4 inch Marvel Universe line. You can see he's got the same outfit on here. And this is a pretty decent figure in its own right. But again, you can really see how the larger scale really allows the sculptors and the painters and everything to really bring out all that detail. And yeah, this new guy is definitely an upgrade. A fun figure of kind of a goofy character. So next up, I want to talk about the new Spider-Man retro wave of figures. Now, this is kind of a weird wave, because generally, when I pre-order a new wave of figures online, they all show up at once. With this wave, they've come very staggered. So 2 of the figures that I'm going to show you I've had for maybe 2 or 3 months, and then a couple other figures I've only had for 2 or 3 weeks, and there's still others more that I haven't gotten yet. So I don't know why this is being released in such a weird way, but anyway, that's just the way it is. So this here is a new version of Spider-Man. So all these retro figures come on the classic retro Spider-Man packaging from the 90s. So they look like they came from the 90s animated line. Not all of these figures necessarily appeared in that line, but I do think it's cool packaging. Although I do miss when they do this. Like, I'm not a packaging guy. I don't keep the packaging. So even though it's neat to look at, I do prefer to get a Build-A-Figure part in my, when I'm buying my Marvel Legends. I feel I get more bang for my buck there, especially when it comes to waves where I plan to buy all the figures. I definitely miss getting that bonus figure. Anyway, so this is Spider-Man, but it's not standard Spider-Man. We got standard Spider-Man in the previous wave of Spider-Man Retro, and here he is. And this figure was a real kind of surprise hit for me, because I already have dozens of Spider-Man figures in my collection. I probably have a dozen Marvel Legends Spider-Man figures, all the variations. Plus, then there's Spider Women and Spider Girls and Spider Gwens, and I have a whole shelf full of Spider characters. And so when said they were going to put out this new classic Spider-Man, it was kind of hard to get excited about it because I already have Spider-Man in his classic costume. But then this thing came out, and it was incredible. It just blew all the other previous Spider-Man out of the water, in my opinion, and I think in a lot of people's opinion. Like, it just got that classic, for me, it's like the 70s, 80s Spider-Man look. It looks like John Romita's Spider-Man. It's really sharp looking. I love the head sculpt on it. It's just, previous Spider-Man were maybe a little ganglier, or they tried to go with a more modern look with like larger eyes and stuff on the mask, which, don't get me wrong, I do like, McFarlane era Spidey and all that stuff, but there's just something about this classic Romita Spidey. This looks like the classic Spider-Man that you would see, like when I was a kid growing up. If you bought a Spider-Man book bag or a Spider-Man pillowcase or whatever, it looked like this Spider-Man. I didn't even think to show you that, but I'm going to take my camera and just show you something. I have a garbage can in my man cave here, and I've got this garbage can for my birthday when I was probably about 6 years old, and I've held on to this garbage can since then. So since I was 6, you can imagine how old that is. But there is my garbage can. It's all banged up, but that's Spider-Man. That's like a classic, John Romita looking Spider-Man. That is kind of, I think there were rules back in the day that everything had to have that same house look, so that there was consistency on all the merchandising. And that's what this figure looks like to me. He's that classic merchandising Spider-Man, and it's awesome. Anyway, I've already reviewed this figure before, so I don't want to keep talking about him. But anyway, this Spider-Man here, you notice the costume's a little bit different. That's because this is based on Ben Reilly, who is the clone of Spider-Man. And for a time in the 90s, he took over as the main Spider-Man. Peter Parker retired, and he handed the mantle off to Ben. And I really enjoyed that. The Clone Saga had its issues for sure, but I really liked Ben as a character, and I was really sad when, spoiler alert, he was killed off at the end of the Clone Saga. Now, it's actually been, he's come back recently. He just finished up another stint acting as the main Spider-Man for the last 20 or so issues in The Amazing Spider-Man. I won't tell you how that one ended since it's still pretty fresh, but I do recommend you check it out. I didn't love the whole era, so these last 20 issues or so were called Beyond because Ben Reilly was working for the Beyond Corporation, and he was kind of a corporate Spider-Man. It was an okay premise, but it had a lot of different cooks in the kitchen, and it wasn't always great. But they did kind of leave Ben in an interesting spot. So yeah, if you haven't read it yet, maybe check that out. Anyway, they did previously release a Ben figure, but like the previous Spider-Man, he was a little gangly and the eyes were a little big. I really like that they basically took this figure, repainted it, and gave us Ben Reilly Spider-Man, because that is the best Peter Parker Spider-Man ever, and now this is the best Ben Reilly Spider-Man ever. He just looks really cool. I really dig it. For accessories, he came with a bunch of extra hands here. So he's got, like I have him with both the web shooting hands, but you can see he's got kind of wall crawly hands here, and he also has fists. So you can display him with whatever combination of hands you like. He also came with a couple like kind of flat webs, so you can maybe stick those to an enemy if you want to have him webbing up. Because this Spider-Man, who started off as the Scarlet Spider before he officially became Spider-Man, he had a cool thing that Peter Parker never had, which was called impact webbing. So it was like pellets he'd shoot at guys, and they'd blow up into big splotches of web like that. So that's kind of cool that they gave that to him. Now, Marvel Legends had previously released the gangly one. I'm going to bring him out for a second. But you'll notice he looks a little different because there was an era when Ben Reilly was Spider-Man. He was briefly infected with the Carnage symbiote for a couple of issues, and he became Spider Carnage. And the previous version of Ben came with alternate Carnage head and Carnage hands, which I always had in my extra parts bucket, and I had this figure displayed as my Ben Reilly Spider-Man. But once I got this figure, I thought, well, there's no need to have two Ben Reilly Spider-Mans. The only difference being this guy's blue is a little bit darker, his head wasn't as nice looking. So I decided to break out my Spider Carnage parts, and now this guy can display on my shelf as Spider Carnage. So that's kind of cool. It doesn't feel like just a complete waste, because when I get a better version of a character, sometimes this one can seem a little redundant. So the fact that this one gave me the option to display him as sort of a different character, that's pretty cool. So anyway, there you go. I'm really pleased with this new Ben Reilly Spider-Man figure. So also from the Spider-Man Retro Wave is this version of the Shocker. And this is a figure that I think we really needed. I'm really glad to finally get this guy. The Shocker is one of my favorite Spidey villains. I just always liked the look of this guy. He's really cool. He's got this kind of quilted suit, which is just kind of unique to him. And people often, I think that the Shocker has electrical powers similar to Electro, just with that name Shocker. And he's often seen, like, kind of portrayed in the comic books as blasting, effects from his hands, which kind of look like electric blasts. But the Shocker actually shoots like vibrations. So he's blasting sound waves. So it's a little different than Electro. And that's why he has this insulated suit to protect him from the sound waves. So he's got the sounds come from these gauntlets he wears. Now for accessories, he came with these effects that these are the same effects we've seen a million times. They come with characters like Doctor Strange, and they come with Marvel characters like mutant characters like Havoc and stuff to represent all kinds of different superpowers. So they're a little overused, but they work. Like those kind of weird, translucent, soft little things that fit over their hands. I think they work really well to represent the powers. The other accessories he came with are some open hands. So that's cool. One thing that is interesting about them is, as opposed to other characters' hands who plug in, right at the wrist, this guy's whole kind of like forearm is separated. So anyway, just an interesting thing to note. But yeah, this guy looks great. The only complaint I've seen leveled against him is that some people want the quilting on the yellow parts of his costume to be colored in, like to actually show the lines, because in the comic books, that's how he was always drawn. And we have another Marvel Legends figure of Shocker that was released a couple of years ago, but it was in his more contemporary costume. And it was a good figure too. The costume's not too different. It's still the same classic colors. Just a little bit, the design's a little different. It's rumored that when he was first created, that maybe he was going to be called the Vibrator, because he does have these kind of vibrating powers, and he's got that big V-neck kind of thing that swoops down over his chest, and then his belt has got a V on it. And maybe they decided before they went to print that the Vibrator wasn't a good name. I don't know if that's true, but you can see with this version here, they've lost all those V elements. He doesn't have the V belt. He doesn't have the V-shaped chest. But he's still yellow, brown. He's still got the gauntlets. But this one here, you can see that they have colored in all those quilted lines. So, I don't know what I like better. I think I would have been absolutely fine if they'd done the quilting lines on him. But at the same time, I don't imagine his costume in real life would have had those stitched lines on it. The quilting, would probably look more like this, and you would see the lines would just be brought out by the shadow. So I think this is probably more realistic. I don't know. I've seen people colored in. I wouldn't bother doing that. I think he looks fine as is. And then when I look at this guy now, sometimes I wonder, is he a little too busy with all those lines all over him? I don't know. Anyway, before we move on for the next guy, I do just want to show you another Shocker figure or two that I have. Here's my 3 3/4 inch Shocker. This is, again, is kind of a different costume. I don't recall what this one's based on. It's a little odd in that you can see he's got eye holes bigger than his eyes. Shocker has usually always been portrayed like that, with the little white eyes. But here you can see his blue eyes showing through, and you can see some of his face around it. It's kind of weird. This might be based on an animated version of Shocker that I'm not familiar with. When I was a kid, I guess I was kind of a teenager at that point when the Toy Biz 90s Spider-Man figures were coming out. There was a really cool Shocker figure that was released as part of that line. The biggest problem with it is that his arms were stiff. He had no elbow movement, because the way they did his power effect there is he had big long blasts that he poked up his arm, and then he flicked it out the back to shoot the beam out or whatever. So I don't know how effective that was, but my little brother Brian owned that figure. And my little brother isn't into toys at all anymore, and I did inherit a lot of his old toys, but I don't know what happened to the Shocker, because that's one of the ones that he had that I really wanted the most, and I still don't have that Toy Biz Shocker, but I thought that one was pretty cool. But I did buy this Shocker figure a couple of years ago when the first Spider-Man Homecoming movie came out. So Bokeem Woodbine played the Shocker in that movie. And this toy came out. Now, he's not a Marvel Legend. This is more of one of those kitty-based toy lines. Normally, I would never buy something like this. You know, its articulation is very limited. No knees, no elbows. You see stuff like this, you know, at Walmart and stuff all the time at a lower price point for the kids. But this is the only toy I think that was ever made of Shocker. How I guess he was maybe supposed to appear in the movie. Maybe this is what the concept art originally looked like. And I think this is really cool. I really wish they did that in the movie. That would have been awesome to see the Shocker like that. But when Woodbine appeared in the movie, he had the brown jacket. I think he had the yellow sleeves and the gauntlets, but he never put a mask on in the entire movie, which was, I think, a real misstep, because he would have looked really cool there and would have been a really memorable character. Anyway, so that's the Shocker. So next up, we've got Hammerhead. This is kind of a classic Spidey gangster villain. You know, he's very similar to some of those weird Dick Tracy villains that all had just some weird facial feature, like prune face or whatever. You know, like Hammerhead, he has a flat top head and he has a metal plate in there that he can use as kind of like a battering ram. But he doesn't have any superpowers or anything like that. I think they've maybe, over the years, given him enhanced strength here and there. But basically, he's just a thug. He's just a gangster. You can see that he's got brass knuckles in his accessory. He's got a baseball bat, which is pretty cool. And this was a guy I was happy to get. I don't recall if he's ever had an official figure before. When the Chameleon figure came out a couple of years ago, so the Chameleon is just basically a guy in a suit with a white head, and Chameleon's powers are that he can take on the look of anybody that he wants to. And so that Chameleon figure as accessories came with a Hammerhead head and a J. Jonah Jameson head, which was kind of cool because those are both characters that would wear suits, so you could really choose to display that Chameleon as any of those three characters if you wanted to. And when I first saw that this figure was coming out, I assumed they were just taking that same Hammerhead head that we had previously gotten with Chameleon and plopped it on an existing body. But nope, this is a brand new sculpted head, and it looks good. I think it is better than the previous one. This suit, I'm pretty sure, is reused, but I'm not sure from where exactly. It's not the same suit that came with the Chameleon. But yeah, it looks good with those pinstripes and everything. You can see it's double jointed at the knees and the elbows, so that leads me to believe it is a newer body. Like, I don't know if it's original for Hammerhead. It's possible, but it might have been on like a kind of one of the more recent MCU figures and stuff. But anyway, it's a cool figure. And I think he came with some alternate hands. I've got some alternate hands laying around. I think these belong to him. So yeah, not much. But that's really all he needs. So yeah, pretty cool figure. I like him. Okay, I see I'm past an hour now. So yeah, I better really move things along. So this is the last figure I have to show you from the Spider-Man Retro Wave. So the two other figures that I don't have here to show you are the black suit Symbiote Spider-Man, which I do have on pre-order. I'm not sure what the holdup is. They have previously released Symbiote Spider-Mans, but much like the retro Spider-Man and the retro Ben Reilly Spider-Man, I think this new Symbiote Spider-Man is far superior than any of the previous releases. So I'm glad I held off on previous releases of Symbiote Spider-Man to get this new one. The other one is the Hobgoblin, who I did not get. I love the Hobgoblin, but I really was disappointed with the last Hobgoblin figures Marvel Legends put out. And basically all they did is repaint it in brighter cartoon colors. I was really hoping they would give him a new head. If they had given him a new head, I would have been all over that Hobgoblin, but I passed on it. Anyway, so this one here is Armored Spider-Man. Now, this one might seem a little silly if you're not familiar with Armored Spider-Man. This is, one of Spider-Man's many costumes he's worn over the years, and it was very short-lived. I think he only wore it for one issue. It was introduced in Web of Spider-Man 100. I believe it was because he was fighting, I want to say, Electro. And even though he's fought Electro 1,000 times before, for whatever reason, he needed to get a new suit of armor to fight him, to protect him. I might be remembering that wrong, but I did buy the issue when it first came out, way back when. And I remember the cover had this kind of foil cover on it, so the silver was kind of reflective and everything on the suit. And it was a cool costume. Sure, maybe it was just a money grab, but I liked it. I liked it a lot better than many of the other costumes they've stuck Spider-Man in over the years for an issue or two. This one just kind of worked for me. And they did release a figure of Spider-Man in this armor in the 90s Toy Biz line. And I loved this figure. He's got... I kind of like how I mentioned with Shocker. This is sort of what Shocker's arms were like on the Toy Biz figure. No articulation because it had kind of a spring effect in it. So this one here, he shot like a web shield. Anyway, his other arm has articulation, so he can bend at the elbow there. You can see I've got a little bit of paint rub on the face, which is disappointing. Some of that silver's coming off. But it was a really sharp looking figure. I really like this. Back when I was collecting these Toy Biz Spider-Man figures, there were so many weird variations of Spider-Man. Like, they put him in so many different outfits, like underwater diver Spider-Man or outer space Spider-Man and all this stuff. And I had all of them. And I don't get rid of many toys. But a couple of years ago, I was living in an apartment. I had not enough space. And I thought, I got to try and purge some of my toys. And I went through my Toy Biz collection. I didn't get rid of any original characters. Like, I kept one of everybody. But Spider-Man was the character where I thought, I can get rid of all these weird Spider-Men. And I sold them all off for probably next to nothing. I really wish I didn't, because I think it was like months later I decided to start my first ever Mike's Collection toy blog, and writing about all those weird Spider-Man would have been perfect for the blog. It would have been a lot of fun, and I wish I could have reviewed them here for you on YouTube. But anyway, I got rid of most of my Spider-Man. I kept the classic Spider-Man, and of course I kept this armored Spider-Man because I loved it. And I'm really happy to get this new upgraded version. Now, I will say this one here is much sleeker. Like, the articulation, like, it looks like Spider-Man could actually really move in this thing. And I think it looks cool. But I will say, it doesn't really look as much like it did in the comic books. This one here, the really big, bulky, armored look that makes it look like Spider-Man couldn't move as agilely as he would need to. This looks more like how it appeared in the comic book. So I kind of like this version better, almost just for how accurate it is. Like, the head sculpt on this one with those eyes, it just doesn't look quite as right. Like, I still love this figure. I love the texture that you see on the outfit there and everything. I don't think any of that would have been there in the comic book, so this is kind of just like added effect. So yeah, it's not as blocky as I feel it should be, but it's still a great figure. And yeah, I like this guy a whole lot. Okay, so I've got 3 more figures left to show you. I'll try and get through them quickly. As I speed along here, I realize I'm still forgetting stuff. Like, I meant to show you with that armored Spider-Man that he came with a couple of closed fist hands. Not that you really care. I also started to second guess myself. I was starting to wonder if maybe these webbing effects might have come with armored Spider-Man instead of Ben Reilly Spider-Man. I don't remember, but whatever. I also was going to show you my little 3 3/4 inch version of Ben Reilly Spider-Man to compare, but we don't have time for that. So let's move on to Shriek. So these are some figures. These last 3 I'm going to show you are, again, some of the ones I've had the longest. I've had these guys for several months. At the end of the year, last year, there was a Build-A-Figure Armadillo who made my best of the year list. And to get Armadillo, I had to buy a bunch of Spider-Man figures. One of them was Shriek. So technically I got her, late last year, but I didn't have time to review her before I moved on to other things. And so then I said, well, I'll just do a Marvel Legends video sometime in the coming months and I'll review her. And then I just never got around to it. So anyway, she is a character from the 90s. She was Carnage's girlfriend. I think she might have made her very first appearance during the Maximum Carnage storyline. She kind of got a little boost in popularity again recently because she appeared in the second Venom movie, Let There Be Carnage. She didn't really look a whole lot like this character here, but yeah, this is how Shriek appeared in the comic books. And yeah, this is the kind of character I love to get. Like, I'm not a big Shriek fan per se. She had screaming powers, which is, we've seen that with other characters before. She wasn't a really fleshed out character. But, she is kind of a classic character now. She's been around for decades. and hasn't had a whole lot of appearances in the comic book, but this is a good figure of her. Like, I like the sculpt, I like the proportions. You know, the belt is there as a separate piece. She's got this bracelet here, a gummy bracelet, which is a separate piece. It's just a nice little add-on. Yeah, not a whole lot to say about her, but she's nice. And there you go. There's Shriek. Now, the other figure from that Armadillo wave that I never got around showing you before is Morlun. So this is another Spidey villain. A guy that hasn't got a whole lot of attention. There's probably not a lot of people that would know who this guy is. And he's kind of goofy. He's like a vampire type guy. He was introduced, like, he feels like a modern villain to me, but when I think back to when his first appearance was, it goes back quite a while now. So he's been around probably for, man, has it been 20 years already? I don't know, 15. It's been a while. But yeah, he was introduced in, I think it was J. Michael Straczynski's run on Amazing Spider-Man, when they kind of introduced the whole idea of Spider-Man. He didn't gain his powers accidentally. He follows this whole like history of people being part of the spider totem and all that stuff. And then these guys, so Moreland is part of a group called the Inheritors, which travel the multiverse feeding on spider totems. So they use their, you see he's got these little suckers on his hands, so they suck the energy out of Spider-Man all over the universe. And, Moreland was a pretty big threat when they first introduced him. Like, this guy has killed dozens, if not hundreds, of Spider-Man in the past. So when Peter Parker had to go up against this guy, he really took a beating. Now, in subsequent appearances, they've kind of depowered Moreland a little bit. He's not nearly as big a threat as he used to be, which I guess happens to all these guys. They introduce new villains, and it takes the hero, everything he's got to beat this guy, but then they keep bringing the villain back, and, he just kind of seems to be less and less of a threat all the time. Like, characters like Shocker and Electro now have become almost kind of a joke because Spider-Man has beat them up so many times. So we're not quite there with Moreland yet, and I hope we don't, because even though I don't necessarily love this character, it is good to have a big bad that can really put the hurt on Spider-Man still out there. So I hope he doesn't become a total chump. His most recent appearance in the what was it called? The Sinister. There was a stupid storyline by Nick Spencer called the Sinister Six, or the Six Sinister Sixes or something. I don't know. And it took like 40 bad guys to try and fight Spider-Man, and Morlun was just one of them. And, that kind of doesn't make him feel like much of a threat when he's got to team up with 40 other guys. Anyway, figure's cool. It captures the look of him quite well. I can't remember if he came with any accessories, because I've had this guy sitting on my floor so long. I think I might have taken his and Shriek's accessories and already put them in kind of my spare parts bin. But yeah, he might have come with some extra hands or something. I don't think anything too notable. But yeah, it looks like Morlun, and he's a new character. This is the first ever action figure of him. And yeah, I'm pleased with him. So there you go. There's Morlun. And the last figure I have to show you here is Fina from the Eternals movie toy line. So again, what month did Eternals come out? I want to say December or January. I know it wasn't a huge hit with a lot of people. A lot of people probably weren't all that familiar with the Eternals. And it was kind of different for a Marvel movie. It was maybe a little more thoughtful, a little slower. Anyway, I am a fan of the Eternals. There's not a whole lot of Eternals material out there. They were an original creation by Jack Kirby. He wrote and drew that book when he returned to Marvel after being away for a while. And originally it wasn't supposed to tie into the larger Marvel universe, but over time they kind of just integrated them into it. And yeah, it's a book that's been relaunched a few times, but it's never had very long runs. I don't think it's ever made it more than like, say, 20 issues or so, and then it goes away for a couple of decades, and then it comes back. So yeah, it's a decent book, and it's got some cool characters in it. And I was excited about the Eternals movie. Now, the Eternals movie, I didn't think it was one of Marvel's best. I thought it was sometimes a little sloppy, especially the way they stuck the Black Knight in there. It felt a little forced and a little convenient that he would have been dating Cersei and everything. Anyway, so it had its flaws, but overall, I enjoyed it. Now, I am a little disappointed, though, that all the figures are, they're movie-based. Like, obviously that was going to happen, but I was kind of hoping maybe they would stick a couple classic Jack Kirby-designed comic-based Eternals figures in the line, but they didn't. And since the movie didn't perform huge numbers, I'm worried that we probably won't get any comic-based Eternals figures. So for that reason, I did feel compelled to buy a couple of these Eternals figures. So even though I generally avoid movie figures, when there's no other versions of these characters coming, and there's probably not a good chance of them coming, I have to add these guys to my collection. So the only other Eternals figure I bought, well, actually I bought two. I bought Icarus, who is like the main, or is he, the main hero, kind of the leader of the Eternals, you could say. He's like the most powerful. He's the big Superman type guy. And so yeah, I really liked that actor. And even though the look was, they changed his outfit quite a bit from the comic books, I still thought it was a cool look for him. The other one I bought was Crow, who in the comic books is like a character. He's the main villain of the Deviants, and he's a well-developed character. In the movie, I don't think they really developed him much at all. They changed his look drastically into that big kind of slimy black oil monster, and he didn't really have a whole lot of background or personality. But I did buy that figure previous to seeing the movie because I was hopeful that he'd be a more interesting villain. And then lastly, I bought this Fina figure as portrayed by Angelina Jolie. This was a store exclusive. So my buddy, he was at Toys R Us and he texted me and he said, hey, they've got that Angelina Jolie figure there. Do you want me to grab it for you? There was only two there. So I asked him to grab one for me and my older brother Doug, which he did. And I've never seen this figure again before or since. So I'm glad that my buddy Brian picked this up for me when he did. However, the figure is okay. I do see Angelina Jolie in there from certain angles. Sometimes it doesn't look like her, sometimes it does. And the costume, in the comic books, Athena was just some blonde chick who wore this full-bodied kind of gold armor. Now in the comic books it looked more yellow. Here it is more gold. But I think it's pretty close to her look. There was about 6 or 7 other Eternal figures in this line that I didn't buy because either they were characters that were not very well fleshed out in the comic book before, or characters like Ajax, who was portrayed by Salma Hayek, didn't look anything like they did in the comic books. Ajax was a male character in the comic books, same as Sprite. And, they totally changed. So not only did they change the gender, but they changed the outfit. So when I look at Salma Hayek's figure, it doesn't look anything like the Ajax character that I care about. So I didn't bother with that one. But when it comes with Fina and Icarus, even though they changed the looks up a bit, those were probably two of my favorite characters from the Eternal series. So that's why I went with them. Now, thinking back on it, I probably should have bought the Circe figure from this line as well. She has actually been a member of the Avengers, though, so I kind of held out hope that there'd still be a chance of them making a comic-based version of her. But to be honest, that's probably a little overly optimistic. So, you know what? Next time I see the movie-based Circe, if I ever do again, I should probably grab her. But anyway, this figure, she came with these 2 bladed weapons. I think she actually came with a 3rd bladed weapon that I probably tucked away somewhere. Like I said, the likeness is okay. I found all these Eternal toys were a little bland. The outfits in the movie were a little boring. And, this one is, I would say, is a little boring. It looks nice. It's got some different color tones and different textures, but they all kind of blend together. It's a little drab. But anyway, still a decent figure.
Okay, so that is my review of all my latest Marvel Legends figures that I've acquired, I think, pretty much since the start of 2022. So, I hope you enjoyed the video. If so, please hit the like button and also make sure to hit that subscribe button. I still, I've been on YouTube now for, I think I'm into my 4th year, and I still don't really know how it works, what the liking and subscribing really does. I think the more likes and subscribes I get, YouTube is more likely to recommend me to other people, and I would really appreciate if you guys did that. And comments as well. Again, I'm not sure, just because I get a lot of comments, if that actually makes YouTube think, oh, people like this video, they're engaged by it, let's recommend it. But all that stuff is appreciated. For those of you that follow me regularly, I try to keep you guys in the loop. I started monetizing this YouTube channel, which is now why you have to put up with commercials and stuff. But I started doing that, maybe it's about October, November. And, that's cool. I got one payment. I think they pay you out every $100 or so that you earn. And but I got one payment from them for $70 or so. Anyway, it's nice. So that's why if you're watching and you're actually enjoying these, but then you just watch it and you click it off, I would appreciate that you do all those things, because Yeah, this hobby is getting really expensive these days. You guys have probably noticed these figures. Like, I know I said at the start of my video, Marvel Legends cost $30 to $35. They were always $30 up until a few months ago. Then 35 started becoming the norm. But you go into Toys R Us and they're selling them for $40, $42. Like, it's crazy. So, yeah, any little bit you can do helps me out here. So, anyway, I'll be back soon with another video. Thank you very much for watching, and until next time, ciao.